She had no idea I was coming after 12 hours behind the wheel. Soaked and exhausted, I just wanted to see her smile on her birthday. But when I stepped into that decorated living room, everything froze. I thought it would be the kind of surprise she'd never forget. 3 days earlier, I gassed up my old Subaru, double-checked the tires, topped off the oil, and updated the GPS that always took me in circles through the Appalachians. Emily hadn't seen me in nearly a year. Our calls had grown shorter, our texts more polite than personal. But this trip, her 30th birthday, felt like my chance to fix something that had quietly fallen apart. I just wanted her to know I was still here. I always had been. The storm hit somewhere near Lexington. Heavy, unrelenting rain, the kind that makes the road disappear. The wipers thumped like a nervous heartbeat, and the radio cut out just after Asheville. I stopped twice, once for gas, once to cry in a rest stop bathroom when the weight of everything hit me. By the time I crossed into North Carolina, my body was stiff, my hands tight on the wheel, but my heart was racing. Hopeful Dot, she lived in one of those picture-perfect blue townhouses, with flower boxes on the porch and string lights twinkling even in the rain. There were balloons tied to the front gate. She's going to be so happy, I whispered to myself. I grabbed the frame I'd wrapped the night before our last trip together to Savannah, sunburnt and laughing, and held it close as I walked up to the door. Dot, no one heard me knock. Music was blaring inside, so I let myself in. And there it was, gold streamers, lit candles, clinking glasses, and a room full of smiling strangers, until they saw me. The laughter died instantly. Cups froze midair. And there she was, Emily. In the center of it all, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. When our eyes met, she didn't run toward me or light up. She froze. And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not because I'd surprised her, but because, in her eyes, I looked like a stranger. The rain didn't let up once, not for a minute. It was the kind of southern downpour that clung to your skin and settled in your bones. I left Ohio at just past 6 in the morning, thinking maybe I'd beat the worst of it. But by the time I hit Cincinnati, the sky had already decided otherwise. Still, I kept driving. I told myself over and over that she'd love this. That Emily would laugh, throw her arms around me, maybe even cry a little when she saw me standing there with that ridiculous birthday bow stuck to my raincoat. I imagined the moment so many times on that drive over hills slick with fog, through gas stations with flickering lights and vending machines that swallowed my quarters, but in the quiet between rest stops and roadside diners. Doubt crept in. We used to be close. Everyone said we were more like sisters than mother and daughter. I was 28 when I had her, young, idealistic, married to a man I thought I'd grow old with. Things didn't stay that way. They rarely do, but Emily and I, we had each other, late-night baking sessions, movie marathons under too many blankets. The year she turned 12 and wanted to cut her hair short like mine, I still have that photo in my wallet. Lately, though, the air between us had thinned. Phone calls ended with awkward silences. She stopped telling me the little things, what she was reading, who she was seeing, even where she spent her weekends. When I asked, her answers were polite, careful, rehearsed. I chalked it up to distance. She was busy. I was trying not to be overbearing. But the truth I hadn't said aloud, even to myself, was simpler. I missed her more than she missed me. Dot, by the time I crossed into North Carolina, my back was aching and my hands were trembling from the grip I kept on the steering wheel for 12 straight hours. I hadn't eaten since a stale muffin at a gas station in West Virginia, and my phone had died somewhere around Winston-Salem, but none of that mattered because I was almost there, almost at her door. And I kept thinking if she could just see me standing there, soaked and smiling, she'd remember. She'd remember us. What I didn't know, as I passed that last green highway sign with her town's name on it, was that she had changed in ways I hadn't been invited to witness. And that smile I had driven so far to see, it wasn't waiting for me. Dot, and as the GPS voice calmly announced, "You've arrived at your destination," I realized I wasn't entirely sure what destination I'd actually reached. I stood on her. Porch for a good 30 seconds, soaked clear through my coat, trying to steady my breathing. The porch light flickered like it couldn't decide whether to help or hide me. Balloons bobbed in the wind, pink, gold, one shaped like the number 3. The other had already drifted loose. Dangling by its string in the hedge dot, there was music inside. Not loud, but rhythmic, happy. I could hear voices too, laughter, someone clinking glasses. I hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. It's a strange thing, feeling like a guest at your own daughter's birthday. I told myself it was just nerves. That the second she saw me, everything would click into place, but when I opened the door, the air inside didn't feel warm. It felt thick. There were maybe 15 people there, strangers, all younger than me. A few turned to look. I must have looked like hell hair frizzed from the humidity, makeup smudged, rainwater dripping from the hem of my jeans. I forced a smile. Surprise, I said, but it came out quieter than I meant. And then I saw her. Emily stood near the fireplace, in a soft green dress that hugged her figure like it was made just for her. Her hair was pinned back, subtle makeup, confident. Posture so different from the girl who used to wear mismatched socks and trip over her own feet. Next to her was a woman I didn't recognize, tall, well-dressed, the kind of poise that makes you fix your posture. Just by looking at her, Emily's eyes met mine, and she froze. No gasp, no smile, just silence, as if she'd seen a ghost. For a second, I wondered if she was embarrassed by me. Maybe it was the wet coat, or the red eyes, or the fact that I didn't call ahead. But deep down, I knew it wasn't any of that. The silence grew teeth. One of the guests, an overly cheerful woman in a glittery jumpsuit, broke it with a nervous, "Oh, you must be Emily's mom." Emily forced a step forward. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted it to be a surprise," I said, holding out the gift like a peace offering. My hands were shaking. "Happy birthday, baby." She took the frame, eyes flicking over the wrapping paper. "Thanks," she murmured, but her voice was flat. That's when Paul stepped into view, my ex-husband. He looked older, yes, but comfortable, like he belonged. He gave me a half smile, the kind you give someone you don't want to sit next to at a wedding. "You made it," he said, like he already knew something I didn't. And just as I began to wonder what I had walked into, the woman next to Emily slipped her hand around my daughter's waist softly, protectively, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I sat at the edge of the couch, clutching a paper plate with a slice of vanilla cake I couldn't bring myself to eat. The frosting was too sweet, too perfect, like everything else in that room. Around me, the party carried on in a strange, stilted way. People smiled too hard, talked a little too loud, but no one really looked at me. Emily was across the room, deep in a conversation with the tall woman, the one who had wrapped her arm around her like they'd done it 100 times before. They were laughing now, but not the kind of laugh you share with someone who just drove 12 hours through a storm to be there. It was the kind you share with someone who knows you, someone who's part of your world. I watched Paul refill his drink in the kitchen, leaning against the counter like it was his home. He hadn't lived with either of us in over a decade, but there he was, comfortable, welcomed, familiar. And me? I felt like a mistake that had wandered in from the past. Eventually, Emily made her way back over. "You doing okay?" she asked, her voice careful. "I'm fine," I lied, trying not to sound like I was keeping score. "Nice turnout." She smiled politely. "Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be this big." Rachel took care of most of it. Rachel, the name landed gently, but it echoed. "Your friend?" Emily's eyes flicked toward her, then back to me. "She's important to me." I nodded, but something in me tightened. Not because of who Rachel was, but because I hadn't known. Not a word, not a hint. Not a text that said, "Hey mom, there's someone I want you to meet. She seems nice," I said, folding the napkin in my lap, avoiding Emily's eyes. "How long have you two?" Before she could answer, someone called out from the other room. We're doing the candles." She touched my shoulder barely, then left, weaving her way back to the crowd. I sat there watching her blow out the candles, everyone cheering like a scene from a Hallmark movie. She looked radiant, confident, like a woman who didn't need her mother showing up uninvited. And in that moment, it hit me. I had missed something. Not just a phone call or a visit, something bigger. A shift. A milestone. A whole part of her life that had unfolded while I was still holding on to scrapbook memories and refrigerator magnets. As everyone clapped and laughed around the birthday candles, Rachel leaned in and whispered something in Emily's ear, and my daughter smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years. I couldn't stop watching her. Rachel, burgundy blazer, black slacks, smart shoes. The kind of outfit that says, I came prepared. She moved through the party like someone who belonged, setting down dishes, refilling glasses, whispering jokes. To Emily, that made her eyes light up. Every time Rachel looked at my daughter, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Not jealousy. Not quite. It was more like grief for the years I hadn't seen that version of Emily. The grown woman with a life, a love, and a rhythm I hadn't been invited to learn. At some point, Rachel caught me looking. She smiled, not the forced kind. A warm one, real. And for some reason, that made it worse. I walked into the kitchen, mostly to breathe. The music felt too loud. The lights too bright. There were still dishes in the sink from the dinner I hadn't been there to eat. I opened the fridge to pretend I was looking for something and shut it just as fast. Then I heard a voice behind. She's lucky to have you here. I turned. It was Rachel. I forced a smile. 12 hours in the rain. Either I'm incredibly devoted or completely out of my mind. She chuckled. A little of both, maybe. I nodded, unsure what else to say. She talks about you, she added. A lot. I tilted my head. Really? She misses you, Rachel said gently. But I think she's scared. That word, scared, caught me off guard. Of what? Rachel hesitated, then said, of disappointing you. I wanted to laugh me, the mother who once burned dinner 3 nights in a row and cried over Hallmark movies. But instead, I felt something rise in my chest. A weight I hadn't known I was carrying. She could never disappoint me, I said. Quietly, though I wasn't sure it was true, not completely. I wanted to believe it. I wanted it to be simple. But it wasn't. Nothing between mothers and daughters ever really is. We stood there in silence. Until someone called Rachel's name from the living room. As she turned to go, I asked, how long have you two been together? She smiled softly. This time, almost shy. About a year. We didn't know how to tell you. I nodded. Well, now I know. She left me standing there, surrounded by party decorations, Tupperware lids, and the realization that I hadn't been left out of. A party I'd been left out of a life. And as I stared at the wine glasses drying on the counter, I remembered the last time Emily whispered a secret into my ear. She was 15, and it was me she'd been afraid to lose. I found her old room by accident. Or maybe I was looking for it without admitting it to myself. After hours of polite smiles and invisible discomfort, I just needed a place to be still. Somewhere no one would glance at me like I'd worn the wrong shoes to the wrong party. The door was cracked. I pushed it open quietly, like I was afraid of waking a memory. It hadn't changed much. The walls were no longer pink, but a soft gray blue. Grown up, minimal, but tucked away on the bookshelf was her old stuffed lamb Matilda, missing one eye in a faded picture of us at the beach, both of us squinting into the sun, sand in our hair. I sat down on the edge of the bed, still firm, like it had never been slept on. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent I used to put in her bathwater when she was little and afraid of the dark. That girl, the one who used to press her hand against mine to see how fast she was growing, that girl felt miles away now. And I wasn't sure if it was because she had changed or because I had stopped showing up. I closed my eyes and leaned back, just for a minute, just to remember what it felt like to belong in her world, A soft knock at the door pulled me back. It was Emily. "Can I come in?" she asked. I sat up quickly, straightening my blouse. "Of course." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She looked nervous, or maybe guilty, or maybe just tired. "I didn't mean to make you feel ambushed," she said. I shrugged. "You didn't. I just didn't know where I fit tonight." She sat on the floor across from me, knees pulled to her chest like she used to do during our late-night talks. "I was going to tell you," she said quietly, "about Rachel." I waited. I didn't know how, she added. There it was. Not anger, not rejection. Just fear. "She makes me really happy, Mom. I didn't think you'd be mad. I just thought maybe you wouldn't understand." I stared at her, my daughter. The child I held through fevers, dance recitals, and heartbreaks. The woman who had built a life I knew nothing about. I reached down and took her hand. "I don't care who she is," I said. "I just care that it's you I'm losing." Her eyes welled up. She didn't say anything, just leaned her head against my knee like she used to when words were too much. And as I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, she whispered, barely audible, "I was scared you wouldn't love this version of me." Dinner was supposed to be the centerpiece of the evening. I saw the table when I first walked in, set with polished silverware, cloth napkins, and name cards printed in gold ink. There were candles in glass holders, flickering softly, casting warm light across the china. Rachel had thought of everything. And somehow, I wasn't part of that planned out. By the time Emily and I emerged from her bedroom, the dining room was nearly empty. Plates scraped clean, wine glasses half full, laughter fading down the hall where a few guests were gathered for a group photo. "Oh, we didn't think you'd still want to sit down," Paul said when he saw me hovering near the table. "We figured you might be resting." Resting, like an afterthought. Like someone too fragile to participate. Emily didn't say anything. She just started clearing plates, her jaw tight. Rachel came in behind her, picked up a bowl of roasted carrots, and paused. "We saved you a plate," she said. "It's in the fridge." The kindness in her voice only made it worse. I sat down anyway. In the chair farthest from the head of the table, the one with no name card. I picked up the leftover salad on someone else's plate, not because I was hungry, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. Paul hovered a while longer, then muttered something about needing to get back to the hotel. He clapped Rachel on the back like they were old friends, gave Emily a quick hug, and walked out the door with the ease of someone who had mastered the art of exiting. Rachel busied herself in the kitchen, clearly giving us space. Emily sat across from me with her untouched glass of wine, tapping her nails against the stem. "I didn't expect him to show up either," she said. I looked at her. "But you were happy he did." She met my gaze. I nodded. "And I showed up without calling?" She bit her lip. "Yeah. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sharp. It was just honest." And maybe that hurt even more. The silence between us stretched. Not heavy, just tired. "I didn't mean to crash your life," I finally said. Emily sighed. "You didn't crash it. You just didn't see how much it's changed." That line settled deep into my chest, like a weight I'd been trying not to feel. And as she reached across the table to hand me a napkin, I realized she wasn't pulling away to hurt me. She was pulling away because I'd stopped reaching first. That night, the rain returned like it hadn't missed a beat. I sat alone on the pull-out couch in the guest room, though I wasn't sure if that's what it was, or if Rachel had simply offered it out of obligation. A borrowed blanket, the faint hum of the dishwasher, and a single lamp on in the hallway were all that kept me company. The party had ended hours ago. Emily had disappeared into her bedroom with Rachel, the door closing with a soft click that echoed louder than any slammed one ever could. I stared at the ceiling, then the wall, then the packed bags sitting by the door. I hadn't even unpacked. The ache to leave came quietly but hit hard, not out of anger. Not even sadness, exactly. Just the sense that I didn't belong here anymore and maybe hadn't for a long time. My being here felt like a shadow cast over something that was supposed to be bright. I pulled on my jeans, still slightly damp from the drive, and tiptoed toward the front door. I didn't want to make a scene. I just couldn't stay. I figured I'd write her a note, or maybe text her from a rest stop 2 hours up the highway. It wouldn't be the first time we said the hard things through a screen, but as I passed the hallway, something caught my eye dot. It was a framed photo hanging just outside her bedroom. Emily and Rachel. Hiking boots, wind in their hair, somewhere in the mountains. They were laughing, unposed, free. There was no room for a third person in that frame. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob. I heard footsteps behind me. Going somewhere? It was Rachel. She wasn't accusatory, just curious. She wore flannel pajama pants and an old college sweatshirt, and for the first time since I arrived, she looked tired too. I was thinking of getting on the road early, I said. Didn't want to wake anyone. She nodded. She'd be heartbroken if she wakes up and you're gone. I raised an eyebrow. Would she? Yes, Rachel said simply. Even if she doesn't know how to show it right now. I let go of the doorknob. For the first time, I believed her. Rachel stepped aside. There's still tea in the kitchen, and I think she left something on your pillow. Back in the guest room, folded neatly on my pillow, were 2 old envelopes in Emily's handwriting. One was labeled, Mom, if you ever come, and the other smaller, creased with age, reads simply, the words I never said. I stared at the envelopes for a long time before opening either one. They felt heavier than paper, like they held time and regret. The first, Mom, if you ever come, was written recently. I recognized the pen she used, her newer signature. The kind with the extra loop in the Y she started adding after college. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled the blanket around my shoulders, and slowly peeled it open. I don't know if you'll ever find this. I don't know if you'll ever walk through that door again. But if you do and you see this, I won. You didn't know a few things. My hands trembled as I read. I didn't stop calling because I stopped loving you. I stopped calling because I didn't know how to hold on to who I was becoming and still make room for the version of me you remembered. Each sentence was a stitch in my throat. I didn't tell you about Rachel because I wasn't ashamed. I was afraid. Afraid that your silence would be louder than your words. That it would break me in a way I couldn't put back together. I folded the letter carefully, like I was handling something sacred. For the first time in years, I understood what had truly come between us. It wasn't distance or disobedience or even anger. It was fear. On both sides. Then I picked up the second envelope, older paper, faded ink, the kind of letter written in. A moment of vulnerability and then hidden away buried under old socks or the back of a drawer. I miss you more than I say. That was the first line. You were my safe place once, and I don't know when that changed. I think about calling you at least once a week. But then I remember the last call we had, how you paused before responding when I told you I might be seeing someone. She never said who. She didn't have to. I needed you to say, tell me everything. Instead, you said, just be careful. I know you didn't mean it that way, but I felt small, like I needed to filter myself too. Be worthy of your love. I closed the letter, tears streaming now. Not the kind that burst out, but the slow, quiet kind. The ones that come from hearing something true in that moment. It didn't matter how far I'd driven, how soaked my clothes were, or how out of place I'd felt all night. I wasn't the only one who'd been hurting. She'd wanted me to come. She just didn't know how to ask. And just as I slipped the letters back into the envelope, I heard the soft creak of the hallway floor, and there was Emily standing barefoot in the doorway, eyes red, holding a mug of tea with trembling hands. Emily stepped inside, quiet as the rain still falling outside. She didn't say anything at first. Just handed me the mug chamomile, my favorite, and sat down beside me on the small, lumpy couch. Our knees touched. It was the first time we'd sat that close in years. You found the letters, she said. I nodded. I did. She stared down at her hands, fidgeting with the string on her hoodie. I almost threw them out 12 times. I'm glad you didn't. Silence again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was thoughtful, like we were finally giving each other enough. Space to breathe without pulling away. I should have called more, I said. I should have asked better questions, the real kind. Emily looked at me, and for the first time that night, there was no edge in her expression, just something softer. Maybe relief. Maybe sorrow? Maybe both. I didn't make it easy, she said. I kept parts of myself hidden because I thought it would protect us, but it just made me feel lonelier. I reached for her hand. This time, she didn't flinch. You don't have to hide anything, I said. Not from me, not anymore. She smiled, not wide, not for show, just a small, tired, genuine curve of the mouth. The kind of smile that says we're still here, Rachel. Peeked around the corner a few minutes later, eyes cautious. Emily glanced at her and then back at me. Do you want to have breakfast tomorrow? Just the three of us? I blinked. That offer, simple as it was, felt like a door cracking open. Not wide, but enough to step through. I'd like that, I said. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. Like she used to. Like it hadn't been years since she'd done that without needing a reason. And just like that, I didn't need the smile I'd spent 12 hours chasing. I got one I never expected instead. One that said we were finally, maybe... Okay. If you've made it this far, it means this story touched you in some way. So don't leave without subscribing. It really helps the channel and keeps me motivated to share more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And which part of this story moved you the most?